Thank you, Jason. This is a fun opportunity to be here. Interviewing is such a fun thing, right? You all look forward to interviewing. To start off, what I'm going to talk about today, I just have a clip that I adore that I want to share with you, and hopefully all the things work. No sound. Is there a way?
There's a panel on, Spencer came up with a panel on the wall.
And the panel on the wall does not appear to be muted, and the volume is up. There we go. Okay, was that not on here? All right, cross your fingers.
So tell me about yourself.
Well, you know, an organized person, somebody who does not leave details out. I'm not sure very good at groups. I sound like most of these days, my prior job, your competitor. My personality to surpass their own goals.
Get famous at mytalkingstain.com.
Okay, so for obvious reasons I had to share that with you. Because when you are in an interview, you really have to be aware of things taking place. What percentage of our communication would you say actually requires words?
7%.
That's exactly right. How did you know that? You took a class.
Yeah.
7%. So 93% of the way we communicate is nonverbal. And part of our communication can be something as simple as a stain on our shirt. Or, I'll tell you, I've done a lot of interviews, conducted a lot of interviews. I've been in a few as well. But there's just sometimes those little things that will drive the interviewer absolutely crazy. And it will just shut down what, how many of you actually heard what the interviewee even said?
I think I got one.
Okay, so you heard a little bit, but the interviewer was focusing on what was happening here. There was one interview I was giving where this lady, she had kind of some longer bangs that went down, kind of like there was this strand, and I don't know if it just missed her eyesight or what, but it just kind of came down like this, and every time she talked and air came out of her mouth, her bangs would just kind of like fly up. And that's what I noticed. That's what I saw the entire, I couldn't remember hardly anything that she talked about because I'm focusing on this hair that's flying out in front of her face. Other things that I'll see in interviews sometimes, when people are sitting on a swivel chair, be aware of the swivel chair. Stuff like this going on. And so you're focusing on that. Or other things that I'll see, the filler words, when people say a lot. And then they'll refer back to that word quite a bit throughout the interview. And so I start counting how many times they say instead of really listening to what they're saying. So it's bad. But that's really what happens. So you want to put yourself in a position where you're prepared, where you're avoiding these kinds of things happening. And so hopefully some of the things I can share with you today will really be beneficial. I've been doing this kind of thing for 12 and a half years now. So I know a few things about interviewing. And I have to say that when I interviewed for my position here at BYU about a year and a half ago, it was probably one of the most grueling interviews I ever had. It was about 5 hours long, okay, this interview, and a variety of different things that we did. But at the end, I was worn out. But I got the job. So, success. I can walk the talk now, right? Okay, so here are some things that we want to talk about. And I like this idea that the talent and so forth that they'll see on your resume. Your resume is your ticket to the interview. That's how you're going to get the interview. But then once you're there, hopefully that character can take over. And that's what will remain. That's what will keep you there. So keeping those things in mind, I want to talk about ways to prepare for an interview. But actually, before I do, I'd love to take a poll from you or our remote folks. When you think about the interviewing process, what are some concerns? Overall concerns that you have, fears, whatever they may be, questions specifically about interviewing. And I'd like to just make a quick list so that as we talk today, can make sure I cover those things. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, this just kind of goes in, oh, I guess I should be talking into the mic, but anyway. This kind of goes into both interviewing and writing resumes and just kind of the whole job hunt in general, is I feel like everything that you have to do is kind of an act. Like you have to develop this skill in resume building, and you have to develop this skill in interviewing, and like you develop the short-term skill that's like, oh, okay, I'm going to put on this act so I can get this job, and then I can go back to being myself, and hopefully what myself is aligns with what they want. But before that, before I can be myself, I have to be this, you know, very good actor for a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that's great, thank you.
Yeah, that might be, I feel like we're like in a testimony meeting. So mine's kind of like a similar vein as that. I'm kind of like, my theory is that you want to be yourself, like show them who you really are, because you want to make sure you're a good fit and they're a good fit for you. But for me, it's like, if I get like really nervous and like I get really stiff and then I'm not myself, and it seems like that kind of like blows a lot of interviews if I'm not being myself or just not comfortable, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Couple from
There are some.
Becky and Zane.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So my question is basically just, how do you not ramble on? How can you be concise and clear and make your point known without repeating the same thing 5 times in a row? Because I notice I do that when I'm nervous.
It happens, yes, that's a great topic we'll discuss for sure. Was there, yeah, go ahead.
I've been thinking a lot about, from a data science perspective, like coding interviews, and I think of just random, like riddles almost, that interviewers will ask to test your creative thinking or your problem-solving abilities, and those seem kind of hard to prepare for.
Okay. Okay, good.
Also from
Another
Zane.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So for me, the most frustrating thing is just that traditional interviews don't seem like they actually evaluate your ability to do a job very well. Maybe that's more a concern for the interviewer than the interviewee, you know, but like, I just, you know, maybe there are better ways for us to understand what people are capable of.
And there are different kinds of interviews, and if they're really good at what they do, they've designed a good interview that will get to what they need to know. But we can't always control what kinds of things they're going to try to ask or get to. There are a couple more.
One of the things that I'm particularly uncomfortable with is the idea of trying to oversell myself. And it kind of goes along with what Maku said, you know, where you're just trying to make yourself sound like you're a lot better than you really are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Overselling.
My concern is if they ask a question that I'm not really prepared to answer, and then the ums start coming out.
Okay, so responding to those unprepared questions. Any other questions? All right, we'll hear one more.
So just super fast to clarify mine too, like I feel like the whole job hunting skill oftentimes feels like an irrelevant skill to the job you're actually going to be doing. It's like if you're applying for a job as, say, a high school physics teacher, and they say, okay, but before you can get this job as a high school physics teacher, you have to prove that you can run a marathon. It's just like, what does that have to do with my ability to teach high school physics or whatever?
Okay, thank you. I'll do my best to cover and address all of these throughout the course of the presentation, and then any remaining things that I don't naturally get to, I'll try to respond to, okay? First of all, let's talk about preparing for the interview, and I think that will help with a number of these things, but there's a list of things that I want you to be thinking about and putting into place and putting into action. So first of all, just researching the company that you're interviewing with will help you significantly. This will give you a lot of ammunition as you provide responses, because you're giving targeted responses that will really mean something to them, will be relevant to them in their situation. So what is really effective is if you've really done your research well, and you know some of the things that they're doing really well, you'll probably also be able to find out what some of the challenges are that they're facing or currently dealing with, so that in your response, you can start selling yourself and giving some specific examples of things you can do that could help address some of these challenges. But let's talk about ways that you can research the company. What are some ways that you know of or that you've heard of? And then we'll go from there. How can we research a company prior to an interview?
Really, you want to just go to their website?
Go to their website. So that's probably the first place that you would naturally go. And a well-designed website will give you some really valuable information. A poorly designed website, you don't get too far with it. So hopefully it's designed well. But yes, that's a great one. And I like to look for things like mission statements, what their vision is, if there's any sort of news articles or things like that, awards they've received, current projects that they're on, those kinds of things. That's what I want to find out. I want to see names. I want to see people that work there and try to get to know who is who, and if there's picture directories, link faces with names, and get that kind of information down. Back here and then over here.
I've been really disappointed in the websites that I've looked at, trying to understand what companies actually do. It's almost like they're trying to market to their potential customers, but I have no idea what the company actually does. And so in my experience, talking to someone who knows what the company does or uses their service is more beneficial than just searching on their website.
I love that aspect of it. That will tell you probably more than still look on the website, because you might find some things. But in always try to find somebody that works there. And there's a variety of ways you could do that. Have you heard of or utilized the alumni tool on LinkedIn? This tool is really fantastic. And you know what? I'm gonna just show you a couple of things here, because this could help you a lot in your research process. So I'm just gonna quickly get on. How many of you have a LinkedIn account? Okay, so it looks like most of you do. When used correctly, LinkedIn can really be a beneficial tool. If you don't really know what to do with LinkedIn, you don't seem to be, it's hard to get very far with it, but just log in really quick. When you get into my numbers lock isn't on, that's the problem. Okay, up in the search bar, type in Brigham Young University, and you'll see a lot of Brigham Young University things come up, but look for the one with this official BYU logo on it. Okay, and that's the one that you're gonna click on. And then you'll see alumni. And here you will see a variety of filters and ways that you can filter through all the BYU alumni that are on LinkedIn. This is the newer system that they've just recently put out that I'm not a real fan of. I like to go to this old alumni page. I can see pictures better. It just seems like I can see a lot better. So I'm gonna go here. Now there's over 188,000 BYU alumni here, which is really fantastic for you. So one thing you can do is you can start going through these filters and start zeroing in on potentially BYU alumni that might be working at a place where you want to go someday. So what are some key words that you might be looking for to filter through some of these alumni? And I'll do a demonstration of how this could work. What are you wanting to do? or where might you want to work, or there's a number of things we can try.
Instructional design or e-learning.
Okay, so, tricky. Instructional design, it's 2 words, I'll put it in. We'll get a lot of design specific things, instruction things, and then hopefully somewhere in there as well, we'll see instructional design. But a strategy I'm gonna try here is, I'm gonna look at what they studied. I'm gonna type in instructional design and hit enter, and we'll see if that pops up down here. Oh, did you see it?
Educational, third one down.
Okay, thank you. So there we go. Now we have an actual, we can start seeing people that graduated in this program, from this program, what they're doing. So when you come back here, you can start seeing where some of these people are working. You can see the largest employer is BYU, Idaho actually, which makes sense because of their huge pathway program that they're launching and so forth. And then you have some school districts, and the church is another big one. Latinos in Action, a lot of school districts actually. Utah State University. So is there one here that you would be interested in me clicking on?
Structure. Yeah, doing structure. Farther down?
Okay, there are 3 BYU alumni that work at Instructure. So coming down here, you can see when they graduated. Look, this one's a little more recent, and I don't know if this one just didn't graduate from BYU or just attended BYU. That's a possibility as well, but you have that connection. So one thing you can do with these folks is you can actually send an invitation to connect. And another thing you could do, you could look at their profile, you can see what kinds of things they've been doing. And if you really want a more in-depth look, you can hit that view profile and see what their career path has been to lead them to that point. But if you really want to work at Instructure, hit connect. And then you're gonna select classmate. Now, because I graduated from Utah State University, I'm not gonna see BYU here, but you will. So you'll select BYU, and then down here, you're going to customize a message. I'm a current master's or doctoral student in this program, and I'm doing some research right now on different companies that I'm interested in, and I would like to learn more about what you do for Instructure. Send an invitation. Now you'll get different kinds of responses. You might get someone actually reply back with a message. You might get someone just reply or just accept your invitation to connect, and sometimes you won't get anything from that person ever, or the acceptance will come 3 or 4 months later. So they're really not that active on LinkedIn. But those that reply back with a response, those are really, really good ones. So I suggest, if they do accept your invitation and they don't type a reply, just follow up with another message and try to connect. Cast a wide net, because the more you connect with, the more probable it is going to be that you'll be able to actually connect with some people. And then, once you connect, do an informational interview with this person. So if you wanted to work at Instructure, give him a call once you've got his information, and just see if you can schedule time to meet. If you can actually go to their place of work, if it's within driving distance, I really recommend that. That puts you there. That puts you in the environment. That even could lead to you meeting some certain people. And then when you go to write, so when you talk about skill, writing resume as actually being a skill or even a cover letter, it is a skill, and it requires practice. But you do this research and you learn more about these people. When you go to write your cover letter, you can say, recently I visited Instructure and was able to meet with a former or a BYU alumni, so-and-so, and learn about this. And I was able to meet this person and this person, and I learned a lot about. So you can talk about that in a cover letter, you can talk about that in the interview itself. Some things that really impressed you, that might be where you start learning about what some of the challenges are. You can start building up some sort of plan to show how you can potentially help them with this kind of thing. So you can really play with it. You can even, if you were interested in just looking at, even, maybe you're just looking for something in a specific area, like Provo. You're in a situation where you need to stay here. Here are quite a few people that are here in this area. You might even see some of your own faces out there, okay? But it's a great way, it's a great tool, just to start finding people within different companies that you want to work for. Okay, any questions about LinkedIn?
A lot.
Anything I can ask for you?
That was really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, helpful tool. So researching the company, talking to people, and so forth. I've been on an interview panel when it was a newer organization, or a newer department actually, for Utah State University when I was working there. And so they didn't have really a website formed yet. They didn't have hardly information at all on this website. And the person actually just called, that was interested in the position, just called them and said, hey, I'm doing some research on your office and I'm having trouble finding something. Do you have any resources, or would you have some time to answer a few of my questions as I prepare for this interview? The director of this department was very impressed. Like, no one else did that. No one else took the time to ask us some information. And they came and they weren't as prepared as this guy. This guy had some specific information to share. So there's nothing taboo about that either. I mean, I like going through the alumni connections and so forth, or if you know someone there, nothing wrong with just contacting them directly either to get some information. Okay, good stuff. So identify a contact, and really we kind of killed that bird with the other stone. So we can, I think, move on there. Confirming, when you've been selected for an interview, you always want to make sure that you're confirming this information before you get there. You don't want to show up on the wrong day or the wrong time or the wrong place. Confirming that is always a good idea. I like this concept of finding out, if possible, if there will be multiple people interviewing you that day. Sometimes there will be a panel, sometimes they'll have you go from place to place interviewing with different people. And if you can prepare for that in advance, if you can know names and kind of do some research on them, study them, look for them on LinkedIn, or look for them on their website somewhere, and get some information there, it just helps you. If you can call somebody by name, right, when you walk up to them and see them, that leaves an impression. You can do something like that. Some people get really antsy and anxious, and they want to arrive half hour early, 45 minutes early. They want to make sure that they get there, and that's fine. You can arrive really early, but just don't go in yet, because that makes them feel a little uncomfortable. They're sitting there wondering. I mean, they're busy. They don't have the time to see you, but that they don't want you to be annoyed because you're sitting there waiting or whatever. So just make sure, if you can walk in the door a good 10 minutes early, that's perfect. And when you walk in the door, you don't want to sit down and be looking at your phone and texting and talking on the phone or whatever. You want to really start getting in the zone. And maybe you'll have with you a nice folder, and inside your folder you'll have another copy of your resume for them to be able to see. You'll have some questions that you pre-prepared to ask the employers when they turn the time over to you for questions that you may have. And just reviewing, and you've probably, hopefully, done some preparation to different things you might want to be talking about, and just really getting in the zone and being focused on that will really help you. And just be really careful too, when you walk in, your interview starts the moment you walk through that door. And the front desk staff, I know of situations where they were just treated really poorly by the person interviewing. And that gets to the director or the interview committee, and that person loses out on an opportunity. So just be on, just know that you're on the second that you walk in the door. Let's talk about dress. And there's a variety of answers that we can give here, but let's start with the ladies. Ladies, what kinds of things do you think you should wear to an interview? Slacks, blazer, skirt, all of those are really good things. April, I want to say April 24th, there will be a campaign that's going to go out. We have a partnership with JCPenney, actually, where ladies, you can take a bus from here to JCPenney and you can buy a whole new outfit for $80. It's a great deal, and that would include a skirt or pants or slacks, blazer, nice button-down shirt. Gentlemen, same thing. They're offering something for you. You can buy a suit, 2 ties, 2 shirts. Is there a belt? I can't remember. Anyway, $199, I think is what that is. So there will be a campaign. Look for that. But you want to make sure that you have nice, proper clothing for that. Was there a question?
From Becky.
Hi, Becky.
I was just saying, do you just want to make sure that you're conservative and modest? You don't want to be uncomfortable in any way. You just want to make sure that you're fashionable and you're nice looking, but always very conservative.
That's such great advice there, I think. If you have any of you ever tried the mirror test, where you put your back to the mirror, you put on what you're going to be wearing that day, and you turn around and then you look and see if there's anything that really just stands out. You don't want your clothes to wear you. You want to be wearing the clothes. So if there's something that's really distracting, that probably needs to be replaced with something else, because that's not what the focus needs to be on. It needs to be on you specifically. Okay. Right there.
One really good rule of thumb I've heard for going to an interview is you just one step above what the office code is.
Yeah, very good. You don't have the job yet, so you don't dress like they're all dressing. And I'll hear that. Well, I'm dressing the way they dress, so I'm fine. No, you need to dress a step above that. You're still trying to get the job. You don't have it. So a step above. If they just wear a button-down shirt and slacks, guys, put a tie on, put a blazer on, and you'll look just fine. Okay. All good thoughts. Ladies, one other thing with your shoes. Closed-toed, open-toed, what do you think? Closed-toed, no stilettos. We want flats or something low heel so you're not falling off shoes or anything like that. Okay. Bringing an extra copy of your resume like we talked about, and references. I like to bring references because, especially if they didn't ask for it in the application process. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And so if you bring a list of your references with you, then you can offer that to them at the end of your interview. So an extra copy is just nice. Maybe they don't have enough for all the panel, or maybe you want to refer to something specifically on your resume and you can break that out and show it to them right where it is. I was doing an interview one time, and it was for a research position that we had in our office, and this student, he had his resume right there with him, and he pulled it out, he turned it upside down, he knew right where everything was. And as he talked about some different things, he would point to that part of it on his resume. He didn't read anything on the resume, but it was just helpful for us to make that connection with things. It was really, I think, clever of him to do that. Okay. This will come through your positive attitude as long as you're doing some of these things. The eye contact is really important. You don't want to be staring somebody down in an interview. That can get really uncomfortable. But you also want to make sure that you're giving everybody their eye time. So if you have a panel of people, for example, typically they'll do a round robin style where they'll ask you, take turns asking you questions. And so naturally, sometimes what we want to do when someone asks a question is we want to just talk to that one person and give them the response, forgetting that all these other people are interviewing us too, even though they didn't ask the question. So we want to make sure we're still looking at everybody in the room. I was in a panel one time, and there was a lady. I was the only guy actually on the panel. And there was a lady that we were interviewing, and it was really interesting. I noticed as she was giving responses, she actually looked at all the ladies, but she didn't ever look at me in the eyes. And this was interviewing for an internship coordinator position for the College of Business, and they were going to go out and have to interact with a lot of CEO types and director types and aggressive alpha male types. And it was a concern that she couldn't even look at me. So just things like that she was communicating. If it makes sense for the position that you're applying for to bring a relevant sample of what you've done or what you can do it. I think it's fantastic. When I interviewed for this position, actually at BYU, I put together just a presentation. They didn't ask me to do this, but I put together a presentation of how I might interact with students and some ideas I have for bringing more students into career services. And I just put it together, I printed it out and gave it to them and said, here's some thoughts that I have on how we could get more students coming through our door, kind of thing. It was just an example of what ideas that I had and what I could do. So it could work really well for you as well. And then you want to have your questions prepared and ready to go. I like to focus on 3 things. I like to focus on the position itself. I want to come up with a few good questions about the position. I want to come up with some questions about the company itself. And then lastly, I want to know what happens next in the process. So some questions like, how long do you plan to take in this selection process? When and how do you plan to notify people about whether or not they will be moving forward in the process? Is it okay with you if I contact you if I have any questions? How would you prefer that I contact you? Now, if you can ask those questions, your stress level will go down dramatically, because if you don't and you leave, you're constantly going to be thinking about it. When are they going to call? Is it okay if I call them? I don't want to burn any bridges by doing that or annoy people. So if you have that information when you go, you're in a good place. A question that I love asking is this: do you have any concerns about me, about my skills or qualifications as they're needed for this position? What I like about that is it really gives them an opportunity to voice those concerns right then and there, and it gives you a chance to put to rest any of those concerns or doubts that they may have. I asked that question in an interview, and they brought up something that I just didn't talk about. I forgot to talk about it. And I was so glad that I asked it, because I was able to talk about it more in depth in that interview, and it turned out really well for me in that situation. So, in terms of how to be yourself, the rambling and question and so forth, and even the overselling, really some of the best ways to work through some of those issues is to just practice. So you'll want to start sometimes you can Google questions that would be asked in this kind of an interview, and you'll get some good stuff. I've given you some handouts today, both electronically for our remote folks and here, and if you got here before I handed them out, I got a stack of them right back here on this table. You're welcome to get them. But just some sample kinds of questions that are really commonly asked in an interview. And ideally what you'll do is verbally practice giving responses to these questions, whether it's talking to the mirror in the morning when you're getting ready, or talking to yourself in the car driving from one place to the next, or you have somebody else asking you some questions and you practice giving responses. The more you practice doing this, the more you can start relying on muscle memory to help you when you start getting nervous. You're right, the individual that said, when I'm in an interview I get nervous and I have a tendency to ramble. And I've seen that happen a lot. And I encourage you to do mock interviews. I encourage you to do this practicing and timing yourself as well, so you can start really paying close attention to those rambling areas. Ask people if you really have a concern about it. You can ask someone to listen and give you feedback on whether or not you rambled, if you repeated. That's something that I'll see a lot. When people give so in an interview, you have the interviewer ask the question, and then the interviewee, sometimes they feel like once that question is asked, they just need to fill that space of time with sound, with noise. Something needs to come out right away. And then their mouth gets ahead of their brains and they start repeating themselves and they sometimes go on this meandering path until they finally land on what it is that they need to actually say. I would encourage you to just take a second and think about it. Because what seems like a second, 2-3 seconds to you, or to the interviewer may feel like 5 minutes to you, but it's really not that long. Just take a second to process. And then lead on with your well thought out response. If a question's asked and you don't really fully understand what they're asking, don't try to guess. Ask for clarification. Would you mind restating that question in a different way to make sure I understand? Or ask a clarifying question in response to that. So those are some tactics that can help you. Now let me just quickly go through some different kinds of interviews that you'll encounter. Behavior-based interviews. Do you know what that is? Anyone? A behavior-based interview will typically start out with, tell me about a time when. And then they'll give you a scenario or a situation and they want to hear about, so tell us about a time when you had a coworker that was really difficult to get along with. What did you do? How did you handle that? Okay. Behavior-based, no matter what you're interviewing for, you're going to get some behavior-based questions. It's just a great way for employers to see how you're going to be in their environment. So when you look at this handout that I've given you, I've got something that talks about PAR. You want to really implement this problem, action, result formula in your responses. And then you'll get to what they need to hear from you. Explain the situation. Explain, like you're setting the stage for what happened. And then what you did about that, what the action was. And what you learned from that, what the result was. What's the takeaway? Even if it's something that you would go back and do differently, that's good to share. That's good for them to hear about. If you think PAR in all of your responses, and you should really be thinking PAR not just for behavior-based questions, but for a lot of these, if you can give actual examples and tell a story, say something interesting about it, that's what really brings it home for the employer. It really helps them a lot. Okay, you have the technical kinds of interviews, and with technical, typically these feature questions that are really specific to the role that you will be playing. And they may be brain teaser kinds of questions, or with what you were talking about, sometimes problem solving, something along those lines. And so you want to be, really they just want to see your thought process. They want to see how you're going to tackle certain situations or certain areas about things specific to what you'll do. And then you have case studies. Again, case studies is just where they present you with a scenario. They may even provide somebody to come in and be that person that you would be working with and see you in action right there and see what you would do in that kind of scenario. Phone interviews often happen when they're doing screening interviews, or they'll happen when they're interviewing someone remotely. And there are some places, I know at Utah State, for example, if one of the 5 candidates that we're interviewing lives in New York and can't be here for the interview, then we have to interview everybody by phone, even if that person lives where we're doing the interview. So it's a fair situation for people. I love phone interviews, actually, for certain reasons. I like that you can cheat in phone interviews. And what I mean by that is you can have some thoughts, or some research, some information right there in front of you. And as you're giving responses, you can just refer to that. And so if you're really nervous and have a hard time bringing things to mind right away, you can use that. That's fine, totally legal. I shouldn't say cheat. And other things about it too, you can just be really comfortable. You want to also be careful. You want to be careful to, even though you're on a phone call, you still want to smile. You still want to act as though you're in person with somebody. Because you can hear it. You can hear the smile in your voice. You want to be jotting down names of people as they introduce themselves so you can refer back to them. And be careful too with humor in interviews. Sometimes that can be interpreted really poorly. And I was on a phone interview one time when the person we were interviewing on the other end said, "It's so nice to be with all of you today. I got my hair cut just for you." And he was trying to be funny, and I appreciated it because obviously he's on the phone, we can't see his haircut. And I kind of chuckled, I thought it was funny, but no one else in the room thought it was very funny. And so it was really awkward, really, really awkward on the other end. We have a question remotely. Becky.
Yes, sorry. So just backing up a little bit, on those ones where you're really trying to like do out-of-the-box questions and see the thought process, are those ones okay to come across as a stream of consciousness? Like to just keep going, and obviously you can tell I have a problem with rambling because I'm asking about it so much. But just really going that step-by-step process, is that okay?
It's okay, yes, as long as it's not too lengthy. So if you're giving way too many details with it, you're gonna lose their attention actually pretty fast, pretty quickly. So ideally, you'll be able to share the essential details about the situation so that they can have a frame of reference, they can follow you, they can understand what you're talking about. But you wanna be focusing on the issue at hand. And I've been in situations where we'll ask a behavior-based question and the response will be so detailed and they'll say so much to set the stage that they've lost us they've lost me after like a minute. I can't follow them anymore just because of that. So that's what you want to be practicing is sharing those responses so they are concise and interesting. Great question. With phone interviews, you also want to make sure that you're in a place that's quiet. You don't want barking dogs or crying children or roommates yelling or whatever in your interview space. So make sure everyone knows what's happening. And if you really need to as well, at Career Services we have interview rooms that you can actually just come and do your interviews there, and it'll be nice and quiet for you. Video interviews are becoming more and more common, more popular with employers. There are tools and technologies out there that people will use, like HireVue is one, maybe you've heard of. And we have an online interview program through the Bridge, which is our tool that we use to connect you with employers and so forth. So there's video interviewing, or just Skype, something like that. So things you want to be careful with there is that you want to make sure you're in a professional looking environment. It's clean. You don't want to see a sink with dirty dishes piled up in the back, or an unbathed bed, or something with clothes everywhere. So you want to make sure it's really nice and clean in your environment. And again, that it's really quiet. And this is the awkward part for people when they're doing Skype interviews, is they forget to look at the camera. And that's awkward, to maintain eye contact with the camera. What they want to look at themselves, or they want to look at the person that they're interviewing with. But that makes your eye contact go somewhere else. And what they see is what's directed at that camera. So just to show that you have that confidence, just make sure you're looking right at that camera when doing a video interview. And then you'll see a variety of any combo of these things happen in interviews. So what I want to talk about really quick are just some of the key questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So super fast random question about video interviews is because anytime I ever video chat with anyone, all you see is a giant reflection of the screen of my glasses. So in those instances, is it better to just take off your glasses for the interview and just say, hey, normally I wear glasses, but I'm not for this interview?
You
Or is
might
it
even
better-
have your glasses on initially and say, I think I'm gonna take my glasses off so that you can see my eyes instead of this reflection
Okay,
that you
that's
have in
fair.
the lenses. I think that would be totally appropriate.
Okay, cool, nice.
Yeah, good
And
question.
Derek, we just have about 3 minutes left.
3 minutes left, okay. We're not gonna have time to practice today, but let me tell you about some key things. The question, tell me about yourself, is a typical icebreaker question. You're gonna hear that probably in every one of your interviews. I've heard so many things in response to that question. I've heard about someone's recent divorce and someone's just things that I don't want to know as a potential employer. Okay, so keep this really professional. You're talking about career goals. You're talking about why you chose this career path. You're talking about things that are relevant to the industry, not about your recent breakup. Okay, so tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time you had to work under pressure to meet a deadline. This is going to be a really common one. They just want to try to understand more in depth your process of how you will do things. And if this is a hard thing for you, then that's okay. Hopefully you're sharing the strategies that you've implemented to be able to meet those deadlines. The strength-weakness question terrorizes everybody, particularly the weakness one. Tell us about your greatest weakness. And people will sometimes try to mask this and give something that's really superficial. Like, I'm just a perfectionist. Okay? Employers just see right through that. They know what you're trying to do there. What you want to try to do with a weakness question is give a legitimate weakness. They're looking for some humility here. They know that you're not the perfect person. So share something, but the key to sharing after doing that is to not focus on that so much, but to focus on strategies that you're implementing to overcome that you've implemented to help you still be successful in the workplace. So they're seeing, okay, there's a legitimate weakness here, but I don't think it's gonna be a problem because they're doing this. The only thing, you don't wanna share red flag kind of things, like I really have a hard time getting to work on time, or I'm gone a lot, or those kinds of things. Obviously, you're not gonna share a weakness like that. The strength one is sometimes hard for people to share as well. They don't wanna come across as boasting or bragging in an interview. It's okay in this time, and I think the oversell issue, I wouldn't worry about that so much because they only have limited information about you. And they need to be able to see or know what you've done and what you can do. So you've already done some of that on your resume, but to be able to elaborate on that in the interview is going to be really helpful. So don't feel awkward about it. As long as you're not as long as the information that you're sharing about yourself is supported and that you have evidence. You don't want to give unsupported claims in your interview. That could come across as really negative. This tell us about a time when you had to accomplish a task with someone who was difficult to get along with. I think really what they're looking for here is, are you going to be able to get along with people? Are you going to talk negatively about people? Are you a gossiper? Sometimes people will just start railing on this person, or sometimes the question will be targeted, tell us about something that you didn't like about your boss. They may just flat out something like that. So you're trying to not really focus on negative things, though, okay? And you want to turn the situation around to what you do, what you're taking ownership of, strategies that you implemented so that you were able to be successful. Give us a story with them, and it would be really interesting. Why should we hire you? Again, don't be too worried about overselling your skill sets here. Be humble, but also be real with what you can do. And then lastly, we already talked about, do you have questions for me and things you can address there? I like to throw this one in because sometimes employers will ask just crazy stuff like, if you could be an animal, what would you be and why? Just to see how you're going to respond. I don't think they really even care what animal it is. But are you going to blink at that? Or are you just going to roll with it and have some fun with that kind of a response and share something really interesting about yourself? with that, and it becomes really interesting. And then the last thing, like I say here, is just practice. And what I hoped to do today was bring some of you up and practice in front of everybody some of these questions. But I do offer mock interviews. So if you're in a situation where you have an interview coming up, give me a call, send me an email, whatever, and I will be more than happy to interview with you. We'll do some questions. I'll give you feedback right there in the moment so that you have something to take with you and focus on and think about. Okay, that's all I have to say. Good luck.
For those who didn't get sheets, there are sheets back on these back tables. If you have additional questions for Garrett, maybe see